me all right?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Finally got here.
I know. Took a couple tries, but we're here.
Hello, and welcome to episode 56 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name's Anthony Spiteri, and in this episode, we're talking to a company that is proudly anti-Amazon, making cloud computing more accessible, affordable, and understandable for everyone, with no hidden fees, no agenda, just straight infrastructure with no strings attached. The company is Sushi Cloud, and I'm talking to Shauna O'Flaherty, co-founder and COO at Sushi Cloud. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Look, before we get into how you guys roll with the sushi, which is I've actually waited a while to actually say that. We've been wanting to get on the show for a while. I love my sushi, so before that, let's talk about just a little bit of an intro to Great Things with Great Tech. Just as a reminder, if you love Great Things with Great Tech and would like to feature on future episodes, you can click on the link on the show notes or go to GTwGT.com and register your interest. As a reminder, all episodes are on good podcast platforms, Google, Apple, Spotify, all hosted and distributed by Anchor.fm. Also go to the YouTube channel and hit the like and subscribe button. Okay, with that, let's get right into Sushi Cloud, Shauna. So just as a bit of an intro, maybe talk about yourself and where you came from, and also your co-founder, Aron, and just talk about what made you guys come up to a decision to launch a cloud company, bare metal, to basically challenge the might of the hyperscalers.
Yeah, so thanks for having me again. My background, I started my career at PwC. I was doing consulting there. And I ended up joining a very cool tech startup here in Toronto, leading global sales. We were doing AI driven use cases for fintech. The company ended up doing a really cool exit to Square. And I left to start my own machine learning product company with one of the machine learning engineers over at DASA. And we're doing predictive maintenance algorithms for the heavy freight rail industry, very specific.
Wow. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So in both those companies, I had the misfortune of paying for a lot of our Amazon cloud bills. And, during COVID, after we exited Neural, I started thinking about the future of cloud and how interesting the conversation topic of infrastructure has been. I was not as interested getting back into the application and applied side of AI and ML. So
Yeah.
I felt like a very natural next step for myself to start thinking and considering the other side of the fence, which is infrastructure. And I had, it was almost serendipitous. I met my co-founder, Aron Jackson. Aron was a part of the founding team for Alienware and ran Dell APAC for many years. So
Yeah.
Aron is 20-year veteran in the hardware industry. So it sort of was the perfect marriage. He has extremely close relationships with, people like AMD and a lot of our hardware and component partners. And I was just really passionate about finding an alternative and something different, seeing how much money goes out the door for these startups. We're really, that's the market, and we can get into that, who we're focused on. But between the two of us, we really had a lovely complement between Aron understanding the hardware side and myself having spent a number of years now building and doing AI and ML in the cloud. So it really was the perfect pairing, and we, spent time and came up with Sushi.
It's an interesting parallel because I think from my perspective, the people you've obviously, coming up in that AI and ML world and whatnot and consuming that side of it, I very rarely see people jumping across. You know what I mean? Like you're either on one side or the other. So what got, I mean, apart from, I think you laid out the foundations of cost, right? Like obviously you were very aware of what you were spending when you were running those models in an AWS or whatever it might be. You were very aware of how much this was costing, and maybe in the back of your head, you're like, holy moly, this is like a lot of money, right? And how do we make this scale? Is it sustainable? I'm guessing that's what went through your head. But what was the jump that made you just interested in going from that sort of modeling, AI, ML, kind of like the software side of things, to this infrastructure side? It's not something that's done often. So what, from your perspective, made you do that?
So as the business side of AI, I watch these brilliant MLEs and practitioners have to make pretty serious decisions, especially on the inferencing side. But when we start actually looking at which use cases we want to train and what we're actually looking to accomplish, there's a bit of a moment where you have to consider if you're doing cloud or on-prem. If you are lucky enough to have access maybe through a lab, or you fundraise and you can buy an NVIDIA DGX, like you have access to A100s. Of course, on-prem will always be extremely performative, but from a scalability perspective, it's so costly. Things become legacy so quickly. And so you really only have two choices. So if you've come to the conclusion the cloud is best for you because it's more scalable and it's more approachable and it's best for a dispersed team, then you only have three choices. So it really is a bizarre dynamic, especially, facing the startups that have very tight budgets, the universities, the labs, unless you're perhaps a major bank or someone with an unlimited budget for AI, you're extremely limited in what your options are. And I guess I just was really intrigued and really interested in problem solving for this. There's a million amazing people looking at solving from the applied side, but I really felt that there was a major gap in the market that was not being served in terms of understanding what the future of cloud looks like, and how, as AI continues to progress and machine learning and deep learning gets more and more sophisticated, the incumbent clouds are not keeping up with that demand. So if you only have two options, on-prem or cloud, but then your cloud is extremely limited, I was really excited about trying to problem solve for that and figure out a way that, there has to be another option.
Yeah, and not only limited, but I think for many, many startups out there, many companies, it's almost like just portrayed as the only option. I think, like, obviously the hyperscalers have a multitude of marketing funds to get out there, and they're very good at getting to the right people in the organizations to say, hey, use us. I use this word often, the panacea. We're the panacea. Like, you're never going to get anything better than what we are, right? And I kind of challenge that a lot. And while I do see a lot of value in what the hyperscalers bring to the market in terms of options and what they've done for the consumption of cloud and the way that we consume cloud, I think they're very counterproductive when it comes to choice. And I talk to a lot of people who blindly just follow that option and go, hey, we're just going to go to Amazon or AWS or Google because where else would we go? So this is why I'm so interested in what you guys are doing, and there's others as well that I've seen in the last 12 to 18 months, a rise in bare metal cloud services that are specialized in this sort of area to start to make people aware that you don't just need to go to AWS. So I think you guys are coming at the right time, and I think it's a really good way. And I think, so are you guys focused specifically, and obviously you mentioned startups and whatnot, and I know that you've got schools and education and whatnot. So maybe talk a little bit about, where your focus area is.
Sure.
And then, we'll talk a little bit about actually what goes into, the Sushi infrastructure.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's kind of twofold, because it's another comment on why people naturally gravitate towards, say, an Amazon. What they have done very well is the software lock-in, right? People become so entrenched, in the entire G Suite, SageMaker, you become so beholden to your tools and your sandbox that you really can't picture a world outside. So especially when you look at the corporates that have massive investment from perhaps one of the big three, and they have these big enterprise grade relationships, those are the people we're not really interested in. I'm not trying to bring, I'm not trying to bring Wells Fargo over to Sushi. Like, we get it. They use everything from Gmail up. So for us, we're extremely focused on people who are cost conscious. So that takes us to the startups, and people who are a little bit more a little bit more open to different types of resourcing and opportunities, which tends to be the major universities, the labs, people building very cool, innovative stuff that are not, we like to use saying like, bring your own tools. We containerize, any of the classics. If you want to deploy a server that's completely pre-configured for you, fabulous, we have it. If you're a lot more in tune with what you want to use, how you want to use it, you can preload all of your own stuff, which is very, very rare. That's not a service offered by the incumbents. So our best and most successful areas to date have been startups, more mid-market. I wouldn't even call them startups anymore. And then, ed tech, education, the labs, the schools, they've been fabulous. And I don't foresee in the near future scaling to a place where we want to hit the massive corporates. We really love the area that we're in so far.
Yeah. And is the vertical that you are targeting first and foremost, given your background is AI and ML? Is that like who you're saying this is the best use case for us at the moment, and you're hitting that particular vertical?
For right now, I would say 95% of our consumption is the computing, the raw bare metal computing for training use cases, AI machine learning use cases. We're doing a bit of web hosting, but I would say the bulk and predominant feature is for AI and ML practitioners. Just very plainly, instead of going to spin up an instance on an AWS, you're coming to Sushi. No matter what this level of sophistication or, time required for your use case, we can service everyone.
Yeah, because you're going to market with the website. You're not shy and kind of hitting out against AWS, right? Specifically, right? I know the anti-AWS. It's a big call to make, right? Like, because they are such a juggernaut, and you kind of wonder whether they would look at it and go, who cares? But obviously, clearly, it's successful, and you've got some certain metrics on there, in terms of your pricing, for the instances. It's a very simple sort of approach as well. I think you've got maybe 4 or 5 type of choices there. They're leveraging very specific compute with the EPYC AMD processors. The RAM starts at 128 gigs. You've got NVMe, drives. So you're starting at this very, very sort of, we're not talking entry-level services here, right? We're not talking about a slice of an EC2 instance as an example. It's very specifically big bare metal servers that are tuned for that use case that you're after.
Exactly. We have a 32 core as our entry level, all the way up to a 128 core. So again, and especially being on the bare metal, the 128 core is so performative. We've had people do benchmarking against, their on-prem legacy machines. We outperform them, by a pretty staggering amount. The bare metal is such an interesting piece of infrastructure, and it's just so unknown to so many people. I find a lot of my conversations are almost educating on the difference between a VM and a hypervisor and the performance of a metal, to the point people don't even realize that they're using hypervisors, because again, it's kind of all they know. So
that's it.
There's so many added benefits to the bare metal that we want it to be accessible for everyone. If you don't have a heavy lift, the 32 core will be the place for you, and you can use it instead of, your projected maybe 50 hours of training. You can get it done in like 20 to 25 hours. So we're cutting training times in half, which again has been extremely well received. But the thesis is it's accessible for everyone, no matter kind of where you land in level of sophistication of your use case.
Yeah, and I think as well, you look at the way that, the target market is there for the AI and ML, but I think obviously it does open it up to other markets. Like I think of my background in hosting, and I do remember, I want to say about 2010-ish, there was a drive for bare metal. I remember it back then, right? But the thing is, we weren't ready. The tech wasn't there. The density of the compute wasn't there. The performance wasn't there, right? So it was just more logical. At the end of the day, providers couldn't make money off bare metal, right? Because it didn't make sense. The maths didn't add up, right? But I think the way that the tech's moved in the last 12 years has obviously allowed it to become, such that you can start to offer these services and challenge the market. So I kind of see, while you're targeting the AI and ML space, I look at the compute that you're offering and I go, maybe I could use that for maybe if I was a service provider, let's extend out to Sushi Cloud and offer some sort of hardcore services on there and have it as a DR site as an example, or there's all these other options that I can see open up because you
Right.
do have that bare metal option, which, unleashes the VMs have a certain construct to them and a certain use case. Bare metal, it's what you want. And I think from what I saw in your UI, and I'll link to it in the show notes as well, is that you offer certain flavors of OSs, so you can deploy it bare metal just and by itself. And I think people can bring their own, or you've got the traditional, most popular sort of operating systems as well. And it's all about the consumption at that point. Do you guys, and this is a question I just thought of, can people consume it via an API as well? Is it open? So can anyone go in there and just sort of via an API interface provision servers, or are we kind of not there yet? Or what do you want?
They can.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's absolutely accessible to them. And our team is amazing. If there's something that's required, and the end user is having, difficulty with their own API or their own connectivity, we have a full team available to, either do the connection manually or include it in the pre-configuration. So we've yet to come across something that someone's needed, that we haven't been able to provide for them.
And so obviously at the moment, server locations or locations, I guess, do you call them regions or just locations? You're trying to be anti-Amazon. So let's locations. That's it. Geographies. That is very anti-Amazon. I like that because everyone else is like, here's our region and here's our availability zone. So you've got like US, you've got Canada and Australia, because obviously Aron is based in Australia, or Adelaide, I believe. So you've got these links sort of there. So you're servicing where you live. You've got Americas and then Australia. So what's your strategy, on that in terms of those locations? Is it just where the need was to start with, or is it some sort of plan to start here and then expand as you do grow?
Yeah, I mean, global takeover. We want to scale and be everywhere. We were thoughtful in where we began, just kind of looking at customer base. We're very conservative as we scale. Being a startup ourselves, we count every dollar. We make every single decision with a lot of thought and care. So we went into each one of our US based markets having customers already lined up. We wanted to make sure there was no latency issues, and we were very specific.
Important, right?
Yeah, in the 3 states that we deployed in. We are very excited. I can't say yet, but we have picked a data center partner who we're not just, putting our racks in. We have quite an exciting strategy and joint marketing and all that great stuff that will be announced in January. So that will automatically put some additional locations online. And then, of course, in Canada, we have a lot of data sovereignty and a lot of things that we have to be extremely mindful of. So it only made sense to be here. And then, of course, Aron being in Australia, we have a rather large school we're working with in Australia. And then we really have a lot of lofty goals to expand into APAC. We would love to have our next, couple sites in Singapore and, all over there, because there's a massive market need that we're seeing. So yeah, really global expansion as, each location comes online.
Yeah. And very specific and I think there's a bit of a gaming link here with Aron. Obviously, you mentioned Alienware and what he did around there. So he's got it's actually quite a fascinating read to have a look and see what he's done. And being I don't have time to game this as much these days, but being an old school PC gamer, I think when Aron might have been coming up there, I'm very interested in that world as well. And my son would love looking at the Alienware stuff just quietly. But I think there's a parallel there. Like there's another couple of companies that I've known about, and actually one that I hope you'll hopefully get on the show in the new year, who were founded because they got frustrated at what they couldn't do in their particular vertical, which was gaming. So let's make the internet better. Let's reduce latency to make sure we can game better. Let's get the NVIDIA GPU clusters in our service to host them, to make it better and get it closer to us. So there's a bit of parallel here, because you chose and you landed on the EPYC processors from AMD, which they're ideal for AI intensive tasks, HPC, and they've got huge memory bandwidth and memory capacity and IO. So I mean, was that obviously from your point of view, you understand why it's important, but maybe just explain why it is so important to get the architecture right for the use case that you want.
Yeah, so we personally are massive AMD fans. We feel that the EPYC is the leading CPU based piece of hardware on the market. It's so important because these, the CPUs become legacy so quickly and new generations come out so
Yeah,
regularly. And we are the ones that actually configure and set up all of our racks before they get shipped. The way we configure them is proprietary to us, and we have a number of different manufacturing partners, but picking AMD as our exclusive partner was a very big decision, but a decision that we're absolutely thrilled with. And the end of the day, we just feel that the EPYC CPUs are the most performative for the AI ML function.
yeah,
And hardware, it is everything. It's just as important as the development of our
absolutely.
platform, our backend, our software. It's ensuring latency latency, ensuring uptime is the best thanks to our data center partner, ensuring we have SOC 1, SOC 2, HIPAA, like all of our compliance standards. All of that really becomes one cohesive bucket that services the end user. And if you don't have the adequate hardware, what's kind of the point to do a lot of what you're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, and just as a very, very quick tangent, it would be remiss because of your background for me to not ask, given where we are, with ChatGPT and what OpenAI are doing. What's your thoughts there, very quickly, as a very quick side note? In terms, you must be kind of excited that it's a bit of mainstream, coming into play with
Yeah.
that sort of stuff, right?
Of course, of course. Listen, I think that the third party, I call them third party, they're not going to be a third party market for very long. I think that there's some incredible new companies that are up and coming, that are paving ways, creating opportunities for everyone, that, will be its own new ecosystem. Yeah, I look at OpenAI and I think, okay, yeah, like this is really interesting, innovative stuff. Like, yeah, there's a lot of really fascinating companies out there, and I think that it's crucial and critical to pick the right partners, the right integrators, and continue scaling on the right path, and be very careful, right? There's a lot of new stuff out there.
That's it. Yeah, it's exciting and scary at the same time. I had a
Yeah.
I didn't I've got another sort of podcast that I run, which is more of a quick little thoughts on X, and I gave a little bit of a thought about that. And while it was very exciting, there was also an element of, oh whoa, there's some potential implications here that could pop up, and I think everyone is diving into it. There's a little bit of that. I was just interested in your thoughts on that, but yeah, no, okay. So
Yeah,
back, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just to finish that thought, I
Yeah,
think that's maybe why I'm so excited about the infrastructure piece and stay away from the build piece. Like,
yeah,
people have gotten so advanced, and we want to be there to be the champion behind the people, right? To give them
interesting.
access to build really cool stuff. I've had a lot of deep conversations in my career about ethical and ethical AI, and we want to just live on the other side of the fence and help those innovative companies build. And yeah, it's an interesting time, that's for sure.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting, right? Because I'm not exactly the same as what you're saying there, but having been on the other side of the hosting game where I would build the infrastructure and keep it running, and I was always worried about, the scale of it and keeping it up, and it was always front of center. But I much enjoy looking at it from the other side where I don't have the actual responsibility, so to speak. So
Yeah,
not exactly the same as what you're talking about, but I thought, it parallels a little bit. Sometimes it's good to be on the
yeah,
other side and see something that you're close to just grow and develop, and kind of respect it from afar. Hey, I
yeah.
wanted to talk about. It's funny because obviously, so I had WASABI on the show early. Actually, their episode 50. That was a really great episode, one of my favorites of all time. So it was only natural that I get sushi and wasabi, because I definitely, that's a favorite of mine. The big thing about wasabi that parallels you guys is really the egress charges, and the fact that
Yeah.
you guys don't charge for egress, which is one of the biggest things that people just kind of accept with AWS and the hyperscalers. It's like, if you want to get your data out, you can, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg,
Yeah.
like literally. And you guys have got your sliders on the site to show you exactly how much 10 terabytes will cost to pull out of AWS, like, so maybe, and I know there's not an official sort of link there, but talk a little bit about, that and also the antitrust and the monopoly that goes into that as well, because that's part of it at the same time.
Yeah, so I mean, we're big fans of the WASABI team, Dave Friend,
Great guy.
they're incredible. Yeah, what they're doing. And they were ahead of their time. They founded a little over 5 years ago, and they've had a very interesting journey. And I think that's the most exciting thing, is getting to meet and, understand companies like WASABI doing what we're doing in their space. What they've developed with helping to move data out at such a discounted price, and then the prices they're charging, it's really innovative and super cool, and it's something that really has paved the path forward for us and gets us excited to think about then the infrastructure side of things. As you had mentioned, we have a ton of storage preloaded on our servers themselves, but we are in January going to announce a storage partner. So stay tuned.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like companies like WASABI are paving the way forward and helping have the conversations about antitrust, because I feel that a lot of companies attempt to emerge onto the market to be a competitor, and they get squashed very, very, very quickly. You need to have a lot of capital to do this. You have to have some great connections. It's unfortunately not a space you can wake up and say, I'm going to start a cloud company. There's too many components, between data center and having, power to storage to compute to, that's why we all are creating our own companies. And then the hopes is that we all come together to create an actual, a company that can compete against companies of this size and magnitude. And I think that it's the right time. And, we were very fortunate to have a fabulous shout out in the Wall Street Journal.
I saw that. Yep. I'll link to that in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, a very cool journalist named Aron Tilley, writes a lot about antitrust. And the reality of the situation is, when a market is owned this much and this predominantly by three companies with, really having their elbows up, we've had some bizarre calls from all three trying to dig in and sneaky understand what we're doing.
Interesting. That's a bit, so that tells me they're threatened, right?
Well, I would think that we're just a little tiny blip on the radar, but we've had some interesting calls. And I mean, that really does lend concern. It's going, I feel like in 2023, this conversation of antitrust and how do we go from here and where do we go from here is going to be a very dominating conversation in the whole sphere of AI.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned the timing, and I think you're right. Like, I know that there is, I wouldn't call it a mass exodus, but there's certainly the thought that, okay, the public cloud and the hyperscalers, we've been told for the best part of the last 15 or so years that it is what it is. There's an inevitability about it. So you might as well just put all your eggs in those baskets, right? And then taking that a step further, the basket is basically threefold, as such. But I know through my, through my connections, through who I talk to, historically knew that there's so many good providers out there, doing some really cool things. Like, and I see it as sort of leveled up. So you got the hyperscalers. I then see the T1, the workloads, those level ones, which are basically the telcos, and then you've got then you got you guys coming in between them, and then the service providers who are the traditional guys that maybe were doing virtual servers or hosting or websites in the 90s and have evolved into virtualization infrastructure as service. They do hosted applications. But where I see you guys and others slitting in is just basically even level potentially with those telco clouds, offering these bare metal services to challenge them, right? And effectively, everyone's gotten used to consuming the cloud as the cloud, and that's what it's all about now. So I think that's the education that we've gone through over the last sort of 10 years, is that, okay, the cloud as itself is not just about the hyperscale, it's a way of consuming. And if you can consume it in that same way, but maybe make things more efficient and not accept the price gouging, we'll say, or just the expectation that you'll just pay whatever you want to pay, or maybe you don't even
Yeah.
know how much you're going to pay, but you'll pay it anyway because it's just what it is. Then I think
Yeah.
that has a lot of runway for the next, let's call it the rest of the decade, right? In terms of,
Yeah.
where you guys are going to come into play. Being realistic, like you know that Amazon and Google and Azure are still going to do pretty well. Like we know that, like that's a
Of
given,
course.
right? Because of what it is, right? And then I look in the Asian market and I see, these clouds like Alibaba, we've got Tencent, Huawei have a cloud. These Asian clouds, which are huge actually in their own right, which actually, to be fair, I feel like AWS especially just kind of writes those guys off at the same time. So it's just a really interesting space where you've got the Amazon way of thinking. And again, I just went to reInvent, great event,
Mhm.
tons of people. There is a certain cult though that is definitely in that community, and they definitely just see AWS and nothing else. And I think we
Yeah.
need more people to sort of break that mindset and get into it. And I think that's what you guys are doing really well.
Yeah, we're trying our best. I think that to be completely developed from the ground up for high performance cloud computing on bare metal is a very unique value proposition, a very unique business. We are not trying to convert legacy. We're not trying to build our own data centers. Like we're being so hyper focused on just delivering the best version of bare metal cloud computing that the market can possibly offer. And so I think that makes us very unique, and it offers us a very interesting place to play in the market. And I think the reality is you really can't even do an apples to apples comparison on any three of the incumbents cloud against a Sushi server, because an EC2 is virtualized. You can't
Yep.
get your access on a bare metal by the hour and the consumption, and we're 78% cheaper. It's just simply not even comparable. And the business model would not, it just doesn't, AWS doesn't support that business model. They are a volume business. They want
Yep.
people to use their machines by the minute, by the second at volume. We are
Yeah.
not interested in that business whatsoever. We're completely single tenant. We afford people an even higher level of
Which is very
security because,
important, right? What you're doing,
yeah,
you need to almost guarantee that sort of stuff, because even though you
yeah.
mentioned that your target or your vertical is the startups and the schools and whatnot, privacy and data security is still super super important. So the
Yeah.
fact that you're offering that as well, I think, is a massive tick.
Yeah, single tenant, and then the highest level of security that you could possibly have with a data center. So those were massive principles and areas we knew we needed to get right. Because again, if you don't have hardware sitting in the safest cages with the utmost level of software security and added features, you don't really have a business.
No, that's right. So just talk a little bit about where you see yourselves going. Like obviously, I think the problem statement is you've laid that out. I think in terms of where you came from, where Aron came from, and what you're trying to do. So the problem statement is set. It works. So what are you looking to? How did you feel you managed to get your legs in and disrupt the market to start with? Was it organic, or did you leverage certain anchor customers, or what was that initial sort of level of disruption that got you going and started that wheel turning?
Yeah, it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, just sheer hustle,
Yeah.
cold outreach, like the classics, just rolling up your sleeves and getting out there. I've been very fortunate to be quite involved in the AI community. I'm an advisor at MIT in the
Wow.
in the Design X lab. I'm an advisor and mentor at Entrepreneur First, which is a global incubator for brilliant entrepreneurs looking to start businesses. So I've been very fortunate in my career to do a lot of things outside of my core business, and through my network, of amazing people. It's been a lot of great introductions and getting those core anchor customers and then using them as case studies to be able to market. And it's been very, very positive, the market response. And yeah, we're looking at reseller programs and a lot of fabulous
Yeah.
things for 2023. We just hired our first official salesperson.
There you go. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of growth and growth strategy for 2023.
Yeah. So, well, actually, the question I haven't asked a company for a while, I used to ask this at the start was,
Yeah.
what's the size of the company at the moment? Like, what sort of people are you got to run?
We're 11 people full time, and then, contractors and people circling, in and around us, but we're
Yeah.
11 people full
Wow.
time.
Okay. So yeah, so still very tight but efficient. That's for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah. Everyone has their role and wears many hats. And yeah, it's
That
exciting.
is exciting. And I guess the one thing I didn't talk about was the fact that you and Aaron bootstrapped this, didn't you? So
We
effectively,
did.
yeah. So then that actually is a huge tick as well. When you're masters of your own destiny at that point in this world, and I understand exactly what that means to completely bootstrap it. That's huge as well, because you're not really then, at the moment anyway. I mean, theoretically things might change, but at the moment you're not behest to any outside investor or anything like that. So you're completely on your own path and trajectory.
Yeah, listen, fundraising, I know firsthand, is the most difficult, challenging thing a founder can do. It's time consuming. We are so fortunate to have dumped our own money into this venture, and I can stay 100% focused on scaling the business and not going out and begging people for money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Just a couple of questions to finish off. Like, I think, what do you see, where do you see Sushi Cloud in, I won't say the 2 to 5 years, but how are you going to basically continue to disrupt the market moving forward? Because obviously you've come in with a bit of a bang, you've got your particular vertical. So how do you then, and you mentioned sales and maybe resellers and whatnot. So that's obviously a method of further disruption. But in your own mind, where would you see yourselves being in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I think that as we expand our geographies, and one of our big core focuses is scale through partnerships. We are very excited to announce two major partnerships in Q1 of next year. We're going to bring a few new locations online. So I think that the core focus really is reaching a larger audience. We have a very limited marketing budget, so really the big focus is market reach, ensuring that we are expanding and reaching new geographies, and then through our partnership networks and our new reseller partnerships, we're really excited. We think that we'll be able to make quite a dent going through those channels.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where you guys are going and be on the radar. And I'm sure people listening to the podcast as well will be interested to see, exactly where you're going. I know a lot of my traditional sort of, network up, traditional infrastructure guys in the cloud and service provider space, and this sort of stuff is super interesting for anyone looking into that world. And we touch a lot of different organizations as well. So I'm sure they're going to look at this and go, hey, let's try this out. On that, I noticed that you've got like a bit of an offer at the moment. So
We
just
do.
mention that, and then I'll also link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, we're essentially buying you lunch. If you want to sign up for, minimum a month commitment for a server, we're going to send you a $200 sushi voucher. You let me know where your local sushi place is, and I'm throwing in an order for you and your team to enjoy a sushi lunch on Sushi Cloud.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. If that's not like enough incentive to get it going, then I don't know what is. And that's like $200 worth of sushi as well, which depending on where you are, you can get a fair amount of sushi for that. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Shauna. Hey, this is a really great conversation. I love the fact that we dived into a lot of different areas. Some of my favorite topics around infrastructure, cloud, and a little bit of what's hot around AI. So thank you very much for being on this episode, my last one of the year, episode 56. And then I think, like I said, we'll put links in the show notes. And yeah, really looking forward to seeing what Sushi Cloud is doing in the future, and we'll definitely keep up. So thanks for that.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. And just to finish off, once again, thank you everybody for listening throughout the year. It's been a really successful year. Again, I can't believe we are officially at the end of 2022 and going to go into season 2023. Once again, if you aren't subscribed or new to the show, please head to GTwGT.com, register your interest. There is a form where you can actually register to get your name down on the list. And to be fair, I'm actually booked until March next year already, which is super exciting, right? So get your bookings in for next year if you want to be on the show. But head to there, find me at Anthony Spiteri on Twitter. Twitter is still operating, which is awesome, and GTwGT podcast as well. So with that, Shauna, thanks for that, and we'll catch you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.